I'm just inviting a couple of friends on stage. How many people remember the days when you used to do business on a napkin? Come on, put up your hands. Some of you guys are about my age. How many did it over a beer? Come on. Glass of wine. Nachos, maybe. Well, I invited a few friends today, Ali, Peter, John, Bernie, to have a little chat about Ottawa's ecosystem, what's going on in the world of business, startups, what are the snares, how do we get to where we need to go, why are we stuck at $50 to $1 million companies, and what's going on. So we thought we would do it in the old-fashioned tradition of just having a pint at some high tables and having conversations. So, feel free to join in anytime. But I just want to start right here. Why don't you introduce yourself and where you're from, and then we'll get into our conversation.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
Thanks, Blair.
by the way,
yeah,
cheers.
To the best moderator,
Cheers.
best concept.
Nice to meet you guys. Cheers to you guys.
I like that. Cheers.
Well, thanks for the beer. This is a great experience already.
It's both, what can I tell you?
So I'm Ali Gilani. I'm a director at RBC Capital Markets. I'm in the investment banking group. I cover tech, media, telecom clients. So we help companies raise capital. We help small companies. We help large companies. And we kind of kick in sort of at the stage where companies are trying to raise sort of 25 million and up. And I've been at the bank 6 years, spent a couple years at another bank. And I also spent a couple years at BlackBerry in their corporate development group during the heydays back in 2009.
Hi, my name is Peter Wallenius. I'm VP of Business Development at Canary. For those of you who don't know who Canary is, we've been involved in supporting and growing ICT in Canada for 25 years. We support Sangen. We run a cloud program to support SMEs called the DARE program. Been doing that for 5 years, and the previous 25 I spent in a number of startups that $1 million companies up to $100 million companies in Canada and the U.S. And so, looking forward to this conversation and exploring the challenges we have in going from one end of the spectrum to the other.
Thank you.
John Cadiano, CEO of Breakwater. Breakwater provides a private cloud appliance for on-prem deployment. So our objective is to give our customers the public cloud look and feel, but in the comfort of their own data centers or co-location facilities. I've been doing this, unfortunately, for 30 years. And I've been on the vendor side, on the manufacturing side, and now on the ISP side, making some software.
I'm Bernie Isaac, Managing Director of Mistral Ventures, venture capital firm based here in Ottawa. Early stage player. Although we're based here in Ottawa, we have a partner down in Toronto, 2 partners in California. So although we do a lot of investing, obviously, in this area, in the Ottawa, Montreal, Toronto, Waterloo area, we have no problem going into the States and do have a number of investments in California, in Rochester, Washington, and Ohio, one actually we're going to complete shortly. We do go in early. We're IT focused, primarily B2B, any kind of technology that helps companies become more profitable, operate more quickly, more efficiently. We like companies that can kind of live through almost any environment, kind of any financial environment, and not always beholden to sort of, the ups and downs that the market sometimes swings.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for joining us. We had a lively debate and discussion before we came in here. We looked over our questions that we were going to talk about, pretty much threw them out in the garbage, and started with another topic. So we'll circle back to what the whole idea is here, but one of the things that we started talking about, and it's near and dear to all of our hearts, is something called the Trump factor. And I'm just throwing it out there right out of the gate because I didn't want to wait to the end. Let's just do it now. Bernie, what do you think? What's going on? And how is that affecting the world? And how is that affecting Canada and North America in general?
Well, we can go on about that one for a long time, but I'm glad that we brought up that one because I think it affects us quite a lot. Donald Trump has laid this golden egg on our lap. And fortunately, we're coupling it with Trudeau, who's and I'm not political, I don't care whether you're Republican or Democratic, liberal, conservative, it doesn't really matter to me. I just care about business. But Trudeau, we have to say, has also provided this wonderful nest that we have to act boldly and take advantage of. If only the 2 elements that I so despise about what's going on in the South, and I do a lot of business in the States, cross the border many times, but just on the immigration and the equality of women and the women's rights, just those two factors alone, if you kind of ignore everything else that he's doing, which is going to hurt the United States for a very long time. But if we can act boldly and put some heavy investment, and if we can continue to market better and market what Canada is offering, we're going to be a huge recipient of, and help solve many of the issues that we're going to be talking about and helping companies grow. Because there is no question that if you're someone from anywhere else in the world coming in, you're going to go to Canada, are you going to go to Canada, or are you going to go to the United States, first of all? And there are many reasons why you would want to, but I'm telling you, Trump has given us many reasons, or given them many reasons not to. And if only we play our cards right, and Canada does what we need to do, and we are, just more of it, we'll be a huge recipient of it, and it'll solve many of the problems.
Any other brave soul?
Sure, why don't I take a stab at that? I totally agree with what Bernie said, and the one thing I want to key on is if we're brave enough, and when we were talking earlier about what are some of the barriers, Canadians culturally, historically, just aren't risk takers, aren't ones to toot our own horn, and aren't brash enough, generally speaking, to take advantage of opportunities like this. And yeah, I think it would be a shame if we didn't find a way to grasp the opportunity in front of us and run with it, but we've got to recognize that it requires something quite bold.
Yeah, so let's rewind a little bit, right? Why we're here really is to talk. You guys are theoretically the guys with the crystal ball that looks into it every day, or the tea leaves, and said, this is the horse that's going to win, and we're betting on it. But there's a lot of issues, right? There's a lot of things in the way to get to that point. So John, we had a conversation about what's needed to start and grow a business, and Ali. Like, what goes into it, and what do folks here need? I mean, these folks are seasoned, right? So maybe something new and improve would be good, but what do you think? Keeping in mind, by the way, there's always the undertow of this whole Trump thing going on. So if you want to throw it in, feel free. It's good color.
You know what? I see the Trump factor affecting Canada positively with the fact that we can now attract talent from outside of Canada. They'll want to come here before they go to the U.S. But Brad's my VP of Business Development. We were in Manhattan doing a presentation for a financial services company. And we had this cool, we were always told, be proud to be Canadians, right? And we actually, on our very first PowerPoint slide, we had it looked like a Canadian flag stamp, and it said made in Canada in English and made in Canada in French. And as soon as I turned on the PowerPoint and they saw that, they said, you guys aren't American? And we said, well, no, we're an hour away. We're not from California. We're not 5 hours away. We're just 1 hour away. Yeah. And they closed up their books, and it was like the meeting was over before it started.
Wow.
Right? So I don't know how much of that is Trump, and I don't know if that was just unique to that one opportunity.
Yeah.
But there's something to think about. I think there's a lot of insular thinking happening now because of Trump. Right? So I think it will affect us from a development and attracting talent, but how is it going to affect us trying to sell into the U.S. as not being Americans?
Yeah, and we'll circle back. Yeah. So the question really is, you're seeing a lot of companies. What does it take to grow these companies? And then what does it take to get to the next level?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question in the heart of this the topic of this conversation. When we try and raise capital for companies, we bring investors, and they always ask kind of the first sort of three things, right? Is who's the management team, and I'm backing this management team. And a lot of times that sounds like a throwaway point, but it's actually true. They want to stare that management team in the eyes, and they want to bet on them. These are the guys that are going to take me to that $100 million mark. So that's number one. Number two is, do you have, everyone's talking about product market fit. Is your product solving a problem? Is there a thesis around that? And third, is there an end market for that? How big is that, we call it TAM, total addressable market? And going back to your point, we were chatting earlier, is if you have Canadian companies just selling into Canada, your market is limited. So you got to take advantage of international markets in the US and Europe, Asia Pac, but you have to be able to show that there is this massive opportunity, because no one wants to invest in something that can just get to the $50 or $100 million. So that's the only size of your market. Well, okay, fine. Then you're saturated. How do you grow beyond that? And that's where people look at, even if you look at roadshow decks when companies are IPOing, almost the first thing they put up is, this is the size of the market. It is a $10 billion, $20 billion, $50 billion market. So those are like the top three things that we see that investors always ask about.
But are we stuck? Like, it seems to me in the conversation we had is not enough executive talent, not enough talent anyway. I mean, I think we're a victim of our own success lately. I mean, in our conversation, we were talking about the cycle that we're in is actually better than when it was back in the Nortel days. I mean, you know, somebody pick up on that. And,
Yeah, I mean, I do. Yeah. I think I mean, to be a little bit contrarian, I mean, yes, we can always do better, for sure. But actually, if you take a look at the data, on a per capita basis, Canada, Ottawa, Toronto especially, Vancouver, we are doing actually quite well. That doesn't mean we should stop and just kind of rest on our laurels. For sure, there's way too little funding for companies like John's, and we need a little more. If you take a look at that data, let me compare it to the United States, or California, I should say, like we're 1 to 7, to Boston 1 to 3. But on the number of startups, on the number of companies that are actually over the 100 million, we're actually faring quite well. But you know, and we had an interesting debate with you know, do you focus on creating billion-dollar companies? And my thesis was I'd much rather have 10 $100 million companies or 20 $50 million companies than $1 billion company. There's no question the Shopifys of the world, you know, have great spin-offs. So did Nortel. But what happened back in the 90s and early 2000s when Nortel imploded, oh my God, Canada, Ottawa, almost imploded. Today, you know, we're much more diverse. We're much less reliant. I know Sengen's heavy on the telecom, which is great, and they're doing phenomenal stuff. But, you know, when we're looking at as an investor, we're seeing a lot of interesting companies, a lot of startups that are it's just a broader base. And therefore, you know, maybe some will ebb and flow and some will fall away. But because it's not just based on one, I think we're in a much, much healthier environment.
So I'll take the flip side to that coin, because we were discussing this earlier. I think it's you know, it's great that we have all these companies that are $100 million that are successful. They ended up exiting before they going public or reaching that sort of billion-dollar valuation or unicorn type of valuation. But what I would say is there's a disproportionate amount of billion-dollar unicorn companies in the U.S. versus Canada if you adjust for population. I mean, 10 times the population there. But having those billion-dollar unicorn companies, it creates an ecosystem, right? There's a whole effect around Shopify. They're creating angels that can go and fund other companies, and that's one of the problems we think in Canada is it's hard to get that sort of seed or angel funding. So there's a lot of halo effect that comes with these unicorn type of companies, even attracting talent, which is another thing we discussed. Shopify can attract talent, even though they're not in the valley. And the thing we hear about most is there's so much competition because people are going to the valley. There's a brain drain into the valley. But you create a cool company like Shopify, you're going to attract that talent. And we have talent in Canada. We've got AI centers of excellence in Montreal and in Toronto. There's no doubt we have the engineering talent here. It's can we create these cool companies that's going to attract them and keep the talent here in Canada?
A lot of that discussion to me suggests we have a challenge with critical mass. We are a big country and we have successes, but you know, if you look at what happened to Nortel, it was gloom and doom. You know, we've lost 10,000, 20,000 jobs. And the reality is a lot of those displaced engineers created new ventures.
Correct.
The challenge has been they've never gotten above that, you know, kind of break-even, couple $1 million run rate scenario. And again, I would maintain that there's not enough resource to support all of those. So you're not seeing the application of that for them to rise up and become $50 or $100 million. It's, you know, it's very sporadic. And in some ways, I think we need to start thinking about how we focus and create, you know, around Shopify, for example, take advantage of that critical mass and build an ecosystem that would be able to propel that business.
Absolutely.
Or, you know, in the Nortel world, it would have been the same thing.
Sure, and I'm hearing very similar things, but are we not risk adverse in Canada?
Absolutely.
Oh,
I think
100%.
Is that a problem that we have that we got to get over?
I think the investors are risk adverse and the customers are risk adverse. So selling, I'd much rather sell to an American customer than a Canadian customer, even though it's in our backyard.
Right.
I think that is the root of the problem, is that we are risk averse. Now, it's hard to change a culture overnight. I think by nature that's how Canadians are. But I think there's an element of ability to raise capital and have entrepreneurs or founders take some capital off the table so that they have their nest egg, they're sound economically, and then they can go and focus on growing the business. If they fail, fine, they failed, they tried, but at least they have this kind of sound economic base. So is there capital out there, and we think there is, where you have a growth equity investor come in and a founder takes, I don't know, call it 20, 30% off the table. So they have a few $million in their jeans, and that's enough, or maybe 10 million, that's enough for them and their families kind of for a couple of generations. And then they still have enough ownership in the company where they can go drive it and grow it to be this billion-dollar company.
You know, but I do, a lot of entrepreneurs use that as an excuse. And I will say it a little bit, you know, Canadians are more risk adverse. And I played, most of my professional career was out of Boston. My partners was out of California. We have the two guys there. We invest on both sides of the border. We are an aggressive investor from the States into Canada. As an investor, for sure, I can't say that we're risk adverse, any more risk adverse than all of our partners down in the States. We're looking for good companies, you know, and unfortunately, there aren't nearly as many as one would think there are, but there's quite a lot. As a customer, I would tend to agree that, and again, maybe just because the volume of stuff that is out there, I do ultimately think it does turn back into, you know, to attracting really great talent, C-level talent. On the technical side, we are extremely strong. And I think this speaks to even just, you know, again, the Trump factor, taking advantage of more women in business that I would hope are going to say, okay, you know what, Canada's a healthier environment as a woman to make my charge versus what's going down in the States right now. I mean, it still boggles my mind how a president can come on board with his kind of reputation. Just boggles my mind. And why don't we take advantage of it, or really take advantage of it? And I do. So, I mean, it boils down to, as Ali has said, you know, if you can attract that great talent at the C-level stage, heavily on the marketing, I have a heavy bias on the marketing side for sure. But I do. I mean, if you take a look, and it's by nature, but if you go through the stats, through the numbers, Canadian companies have way more international customers than the US do. The US doesn't have to. But I think with good talent, you bridge so many of those issues. And I do. I think we just have this wonderful opportunity right now. And whether we even go into a sector, AI is a wonderful sector, machine learning right now, because it hits all sectors. But again, because you're having to draw from talent from all over the world now for true AI. A lot of companies will use the word AI for sure. But Toronto, as Ali said, we already have a good beginning. But if we could, as many of the corporations getting together, the universities get together, and really make Canada, the Waterloo Toronto is doing a nice job, but I mean really invest boldly into attracting the very best talent that then in turn will bring in other great talent in the AI space, in the machine learning, in the cloud. Mm-hmm. Cloud's a phenomenal space. I mean, you know, there's a reason why Amazon and Google's are going head to head right now. I do. I think there's an opportunity for us to go right. I don't think our environment is so bad.
Yeah, and it begs the question, right? Is government playing enough of a role, or should it be playing more of a role in this? So we look at immigration. Right now, the Global Skills Initiative is probably one of the best initiatives they've come up with. 13 cities, by the way, the wealth-generating cities of Canada, all signed an MOU to work with Global Affairs Canada and the immigration folks to bring in talent from around the world. And it fast-tracks people through this process in a couple of weeks versus months and months and months. You need it. You have to have it, right? We got to grow. We don't have enough talent. But there are other ways. So there are things going on right now. Are there other ways, John and Peter? I mean, Peter, you're not that you're government, but you're funded heavily by them. You've worked with them a lot. What else can we do for companies?
So when you look at the title of the panel, right? When you're breaking through that barrier, right? You're no longer a startup when you're talking about breaking through the $100 million barrier, right? So I think the government has wonderful programs in place: BCPIP, IRAP. Shreds is good for companies at any level because it's always getting development funds back.
VCAP.
Yeah. The problem with the three I mentioned, though, is the focus is on established companies who are cash flow positive. Right. That's not the definition of a startup.
True.
Right. Yeah. So the government, in my opinion, does nothing for startups. Right. And the venture community does nothing from a seed perspective for startups in Canada. Right. I was lucky enough that I had another company and I bootstrapped Breakwater. right?
Although I would argue that places like Communitech, Mars, and of course Innovation Center where we are, there is money that goes into it. You have OCE or VIRAP at that early stage stuff that's going on, right? It's happening. It is happening.
The idea of there being a government-funded pool of money for startups to provide seed, I don't think exists.
But nor should it.
Yeah.
John,
No.
nor should it.
No. It should.
Nor should it.
No. What
See what happens
should
when you give
happen?
them a beer?
Well,
He's already done his.
the idea. We did this 2 hours ago.
Yes, we did.
The idea of government being involved in investment, that would be like them telling you how to invest, right? But the concept behind the government providing you money with VCAP, right, now provides you with more money to go out and invest in more companies.
Correct.
So let's say before VCAP, you could only invest in 2 or 3 or 5 companies a year. Now you can invest in 10 or 15 companies a year.
Correct. Or there are more Mistrals to be able to invest more companies.
Exactly. So the government freeing up more money will allow companies like Mistral the opportunity to go invest in more companies like Breakwater.
Right.
Right? That's what we need more of. The programs that currently exist for companies that are already cash flow positive, which are not startups.
But I think to that point, and I do think, I mean, Sengen's done a great job in what you guys are doing. I mean, the Canary doing a great job. And I have to admit, I call out to BDC. I don't know if anyone from BDC is out here, but I have to admit BDC, through the government, has done a great job. Through their investment arm, and I know that they're kind of morphing it from time to time, but I mean, they've been always great co-investors. And the VCAP program that they're, it's always taking longer to launch than it is, but it's VCAP 2, which is already great. It is. There's no question where we lack dramatically that there's not enough capital to invest in companies like yours. And you have to invest in enough companies like yours to ultimately have some of them grow into 100 million companies, 100 million. And you have to, and we have to have more guys like yourself who have had a successful company, had an excellent, I'm not against people selling at $25 or $50 million because now it gives you enough comfort, financial comfort to say, okay, look, I've taken care of my retirement. I've put my family through hell already. It's time to have some level of comfort. And then on the second and or third company, which California has had a lot of, there's no question, then I go for the big win. Yeah. But I do think, although, again, things can definitely go faster, and it'd be nice to see more. But over the last 5 years, for sure, you've seen a lot more firms like mine come up that, and then in turn can invest. But I mean, we're investing in 1 in 100 companies that we see. So I mean, it's pretty small, and therefore we're missing many. I hadn't even heard of John before. I mean, that's embarrassing. Yeah. But it's because there aren't enough, and we have too many.
Yeah,
So
I think where it needs to get augmented is, going back to my earlier point, is having angels or high net worth individuals that have had successful outcomes to come and fund that seed or angel round. I was at the SAS North conference here in Ottawa last week, and Harley Finkelstein, the COO of Shopify, was on the stage, and he said, I got a call. As soon as I went public, I got a call from my mentor, and he said, how are you going to pay this forward? You got to go out, find 10 companies, and go and seed them. And then it becomes a cycle. So you seed these companies, hopefully they get to the $1 billion, and then it creates more wealthy entrepreneurs that can then go and seed the next Shopifys. So I think it has to be both.
I agree.
So those kind of guys are very few and far between. So to me, answering the question, you said certainly immigration. To your point, Ali, taxation, and provide them incentives to make that wealth available into the system.
That's true.
And then government, use procurement to give small companies opportunities. Those are the 3 levers.
Talk to me about, I don't know who wants to go first, it's up for anybody, but SaaS, revenue generating. And we talked a little bit about this, and I think maybe Al, you did it first, but.
Yeah, I think, that's obviously the hot kind of topic these days is it's the SaaS or recurring revenue model. I don't think it's necessarily a new thing, it's just come into favor recently. If you look at it from an investor's perspective, it's like you've got visibility into what your revenue is going to be. You have contracted revenue, so you know kind of what your downside is, if you will. And what investor doesn't like that? There's a downside protection in that you have contracted revenue, and then there's a lot of upside in terms of what you can go and sell. So from a business model perspective, it plays very well to investors, and they can see obviously getting a return from that. But again, I don't think it's a new concept. It's just something that's surfaced again as what investors look for.
Right, and then, you know, I want to go back to this notion of the majority of companies in Canada. And I'll make a correlation with, of course, talent, et cetera, and getting high-level CEOs and mentors and all this kind of great stuff. And again, back to the regional innovation centers and folks like that that do mentoring and entrepreneurs in residence and all that. That's happening, right? It's happening. But again, I'm going to drive back to this $100 million revenue. Why are we stuck? Is it that, or is there more things that we can do? Like, what are you seeing in terms of what you look at in terms of companies?
I can only speak from personal experience. Created a public company.
Yeah.
We drove to $60 million actually quite easily. We were kind of surprised at that, and then found, you know, we got to 100 million, and then just found we hit the wall. I think it was a variety of factors. We were listed on the TSX. You didn't get the attraction of U.S. investors. We had a hard time, or we spent a lot of time sending people into the U.S. and building global markets.
Right.
It probably would have been easier to move the entire company down to the U.S. and brand ourselves a U.S. company, and I think we would have opened a lot more doors. I think there's I don't know if it was a stigma, but you know, there was a preference over U.S. companies selling into the U.S. and into the States. I think it's just a fact of life.
We need to have them down there dinging the bell
It
like
is.
a shop. And I hate to keep going back to Shopify, but it happens to be one of the greatest stories ever coming out of Ottawa. But it's a good
hopefully the whole idea of the digital economy and SaaS and you know, monetizing data overcomes some of those barriers, right? We heard Christian in the last session. You know, data knows no borders. So you know, I think there's greater opportunities, but I think it's always going to be a challenge.
John? Oh, sorry.
No, let me.
Okay.
You're right. You know, and this does, again, it does speak. You know, it kind of keeps on coming back to, you need the talent, the global talent that can reach out beyond Canada. We haven't done good enough of a job. We are, as you said, we had an interesting conversation about it, but we're not bold and brash. Now, bold and brash sometimes gets you a drum, which is the negative side, but I think that there are many ways that you can be bold and brash, that you capitalize on what is good, and we really go out there. And it is, I think we've just been given this golden opportunity right now on the international stage where Canada becomes an interesting place to come. And we do need, you know, and Ottawa will have the trouble. Unfortunately, you know, we love Shopify, no question about it. How many Shopifys can $1.3 million population handle? Not many. Yeah. They're already sucking a lot of the great talent, and a lot of the smaller players that we're also involved with are having trouble fighting. Okay, I just lost another guy to Shopify. Okay, yeah, we're only 1.3. Now, if you take Montreal, Toronto, Waterloo, you know, all into one cycle, which we should, one grouping, there is enough talent. And again, I think we can do by simply promoting us more aggressively and spending some more money. I think we'll reap some interesting rewards.
I think on the talent front, it's an interesting point you bring up. I think we've all established that we've got the technical talent here in Canada. I mean, all the great universities. We talked about the AI hubs. I think what we struggle with, and I'll be bold about this, is that we're not good at sales. Every company I've talked to that we tried to raise capital for don't have a good sales team. They have to go and recruit it from the U.S. or elsewhere. And I don't know if it's just inherent in our genes that we're not brash, I guess, per se. We're a bit shy about that. So I find where we really struggle, and why it's part of the reason why it's hard for a company to get past that $50 million revenue mark is just they don't have the sales talent. So we need to get more of that. Now, I don't know if is it a systemic thing where maybe everyone should go be a salesperson when they finish university, just kind of to get that mentality in them. But I think it's a real challenge for us and something we're not good at.
And part of it, I think, is, you know, you learn sales skills. You learn how to manage a sales operation and sales force. And you learn that in finishing schools, which are large, you know, in the tech world, Dells and Apples and all those. We don't have those. So you don't get those skills. You know, you have to move to the U.S. to get them. And once you're down there, you're there. Yeah. So if we're going to recruit them, we have to recruit them from the U.S.
It's true. I mean, I do think part of the problem is a bit structural. Yourself, you just came from on a red eye. Unfortunately, you couldn't fly to Ottawa directly on a red eye. You know, we do need to, and again, if, you know, in constructive things on what could we do to improve it. A, force Air Canada to make flights actually to Boston or New York or Chicago actually relatively affordable instead of gouging me for $800 every time I want to fly down there, which is a pain in the ass, and have a direct flight that goes to San Francisco instead of forcing me to fly through another hub. You know, that would make a big difference. I mean, literally just structurally, and you do. You're 40-year-old rock star, sales, marketing, whatever, and you're kind of forced into, okay, where do I want to locate? Oh, did you say I've got to take 2 flights to get to Ottawa? Oh, cool. And where is Ottawa, by the way? You know, we'll
those are
often
fighting
come
words over here, buddy. I take the message to the world.
No, but I think we can, and you know, I keep on coming back to this, and I think with the surge of women and young women in the business world is fabulous, to take advantage of it, and really go for it.
So I'm going to switch gears, and we talk commercialization, you know, and you guys are in the business of getting things rolling and product out to market. Do we have a challenge, or does the United States have a leg up on us in adopting new technology? Do we find we're lagging, or is it changing? Because it used to be everybody complained that nobody in Canada is taking the technology. They have to go outside, get noticed outside, especially in the U.S., and then they come back and they're rock stars, right? And with the advent of internet and everything else that's going on and doing everything virtually, theoretically that should be sort of disappearing. Is that disappearing, or is that still the case, or what are you guys seeing?
Yeah, I don't think I don't think they necessarily have a leg up anymore. Maybe that was the notion before, but I just think that technically, and I've said this a few times now, that we are very, very strong and we compete on a world stage.
Hold on a minute. That wasn't his question. His question was, are Canadian companies adopting new technology at the same rate at which American companies are adopting new technology?
Or government, or
right?
whomever.
And I would,
Well,
I would
mean,
highly
look,
disagree with you there.
I
don't
agree
know. I
with you,
mean,
John, that
like
they're
you
not.
look at Toronto and you look at Sidewalk Labs and Google, that they just came in and they won a contract to redevelop the entire waterfront as a smart city. This is Toronto, a city in Canada that said, okay, our waterfront, prime real estate, go and make it a smart city. So I do think that we are pretty open to adopting new technologies.
Guess who's doing that waterfront? A New York firm.
Yes, but it's a Canadian city that's
And it's an exception.
spending money on
it's
it, right?
exception, not the norm. If you look at Gartner's adoption curve, there's laggards and then there's Canadians,
well, I mean,
right? I mean, like, let's be honest. Let's be honest. Right?
I mean, I think
You're
part
cut
of
off. Or wait a minute.
No, I want to hear more of
You've
that.
already done. I'm close second. I mean, I think the one thing we do, we always compare ourselves. When we say the United States, we're actually saying Silicon Valley, or Chicago, or Boston, or New York. I mean, having lived there for 10 years, and I do love it. We were in Boston, but I'm telling you that, you know, that economy is, or the culture is so diverse, that, you know, we do need to differentiate, you know, because you want to talk about, you know, laggard, you know, technology. Go to the bloody Midwest. You know, it's pretty stark. Anyways, but, you know, and compared to Silicon Valley, yeah, okay, we're behind. But, I mean, they are truly the top of the top, and they've got this, I mean, they've got all the big guys, and they're paying millions and millions of dollars for the top talent. But I do, you are right that I think, especially in the financial sector, that, you know, our banks operate like an oligopoly. You know, there's no question the United States is a more competitive sort of culture, and therefore, because of competition, you have to be more innovative, otherwise you die. Canada has a little bit more luxury that they don't have to do that.
I think from a talent perspective, you know, you need different types of sales organizations for different points in the company. So a startup salesperson is completely different than an established company salesperson. So you need to be aware of that when you're hiring sales, that if you're hiring a startup, it's a unique animal. And as far as technologies, last week I lost a guy to Bloomberg in New York. Yeah. Right? I mean, if you want an OpenStack Kubernetes guy and you're in New York, where are you going to go? Yeah. There are none there. Yeah, so you get a guy here and you say, I'm going to give you an NT1 visa and bring him over.
But I'll sorry, and I'm going to take this back to, I hate to do the Trump thing, but I will. So Amazon, right? We just Did anybody see the Amazon video we put out and everything? And it was out there for a while. Thank you very much, one person. Well, three. Okay, fine. But I'll tell you, there's a company, and you can say what you want. They may be saying that they're kind of poking the bear and trying to get the attention of Trump for various reasons, and you need a whack of cash to put out on the front lawn to get them attracted here. But when I was on the phone with them and I was talking to, arguably, what is it, the second, third largest company in the world, almost 500,000 people, and they want to double that in 20 years or something. They're looking for 50,000 people, 45 buildings, 8 million square feet on over 120 acres of land, somewhere around there. People said to me, you're crazy, an American company's never going to look up here. You don't have the talent, you don't have this, you don't have that. But when I was on the phone with them, they said, listen, it's not all about the incentives. It's not all about the money. It's about getting into a culture, getting into an ecosystem that they can call their own and growing. And I think this flash in the pan and this way of doing things that the Americans used to do, they're changing their philosophy on life, and they have to. They have to, because of what's going on down there. I think we're viable. I think we can actually do this. I think when they look at what we have to offer here in our ecosystem, and by the way, my catchment area isn't just Ottawa. It's Toronto, it's Waterloo, it's Vancouver, it's Calgary. Oh, and by the way, it's upstate New York and everywhere else. Because that halo effect you guys are talking about is going to happen. I really believe things are changing. I think they're starting to look at places like us. We don't have to be Silicon Valley. We can run our own race. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree.
Trying to get you all excited about this. Let's go. Huh?
Well, I'll look at it because we deal with a lot of investors, and what I'll tell you is that the U.S. market, it's a bit saturated. There's a lot of competition. So investors are now looking to Canada, and they say, there are so many kind of diamonds in the rough, if you will, that Canada is a great fertile ground to invest in companies. And it's pretty impressive that big investors like Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia will come to Canada and look for companies specifically here, and they'll put guys here, and they'll send guys on planes every month and come here and
we're doing
hunt for
deals
companies.
like that, right?
And we're doing deals like these.
Like that.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And and Blair, I mean, I'm totally on your bandwagon. That and it's not, and I said it at the beginning, it's not just the Trump factor. But I can't tell you. I mean, I get to deal with the decision makers of Amazon and Google, and they're saying they're even less on the anti-Trump versus people want to be associated with your culture, what's going on up there.
Yeah.
They like this cool, new, good-looking. And again, I don't care what your political standing is.
He's handsome.
I want to be associated. Yeah, they do.
Lie.
He's cool. I want to be associated with an economy that is going to be immigrant friendly, that is going to kind of promote the women. And they said, look at, specifically the Google guys were saying, look at, it's almost more a draw towards that versus against what's going on down there. Yeah. And I thought that was cool. And again, as long as it's a catchment of Ottawa, Waterloo, Toronto, Montreal, that's a serious catchment.
So we have like 4.5 minutes. So I'm going to shoot we could go on forever, but single most important action we can take to support our goal of our companies and growing them, et cetera. And I'll start here and we'll end with you. What do you think?
Well, I'll give you 3, and I've said this before, but this is a good way to summarize. One is, I think we've got to do a better job of getting that sales talent, whether that starts at university level or if there's some sort of training, but we gotta do a better job at that. 2, we gotta get more capital here, whether that's from the U.S. or Canada, fine, where we can get entrepreneurs the liquidity that they need so that they're economically sound and that they can go then and run their companies to make them $1 billion. So 2 things. And the third thing I would say is, again, it goes back to sort of this creating angels, but let's tap the angel network, let's tap the high net worth individual network here and help them fund companies like yours. And we have to do that outreach to people and then see that kind of halo effect that happens.
There's an awful lot of money in the system supporting startups, SMEs,
I agree.
from various levels of government, but it's totally uncoordinated. It's just, we talked about it earlier. I mean, for you to navigate something, it's just almost impossible. So, you need to find a way for various levels of government to come together with a consolidated integrated strategy on how to support and achieve some of these ideas. Because it's not that complicated.
No. It's literally picking up the phone and talking to each other, right? I would think.
I think they've
It's a
already
novel
started
concept.
with. I think they've already started with programs like VCAP and programs that BDC are currently offering. So I think one of the biggest things would be maybe further funding those programs. The BDC's got some great stuff out. VCAP, as we talked about earlier, is a winner. It's a jewel, and hopefully that provides you guys with the funding you need to invest in more companies like us.
So this is your shot. The most important or critical thing we can do is that, or did you have something else that you want to add?
Unless you're writing a check. No.
There was your spot.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
You can have your own. He had one.
No. I
truly
truly believe that the government, I think, has the right intention, and I think they should continue doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
And let the professionals invest in where they think it should be, and hopefully that stays here, because I know your mandate's not just Canada.
Right. But, yeah.
All right, Bernie.
Two. I want two. Can I say? He took three. So
I
I'm
took
going there.
three,
I can
so.
go in the middle.
Knock yourself out, man.
There's no question
You got
there.
$1.30 left.
Oh, there we go.
You better go.
We definitely need more capital so that there can be more Mistrals to invest in more Canadian companies, and it will. I'm a strong believer in laissez-faire economics. The top will rise to the top, but we do definitely have too little capital to fund guys like yourself. Definitely one. But the second one is for me very strongly is we have to market the Canadian brand more strongly. You talked about it in our conversation earlier. You're losing companies to the coolness of a Facebook, the coolness of a Google. Well, Canada's got to be the cool place to work for many reasons, and we've got it. We've got the opportunity. If together with corporations, what you guys are doing with Canary, with Scenics, I think there's an opportunity for more corporate Canada to put more money into the system. And let Canada become, and let's choose, in my opinion, I would be choosing two spaces, AI and the cloud, because you have to have these clusters, and we've got the beginnings of it. So invest heavily into it so that we will become the experts in it. We already started, and be the cool place to go because you just don't want to be somewhere else.
Excellent. So on your point, there is an organization called Consider Canada City Alliance, which is working with the 13 top wealth-generating cities across Canada to do exactly that, align them with the Global Affairs Canada, with the new investment hub, with all the provinces right across, and then, of course, the cities themselves are aligning it, and it's because we just need to punch above our weight and all be on the same page. We're so small. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you to our panel. Round of applause.